Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health Live, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Susanna Alter.
And if it's your first time stopping in, welcome. You can feel free to subscribe, give a rating, give a review, leave a comment, say hello, provide some feedback. We really appreciate it.
We've also got a Patreon account now and are accepting any and all donations.
Yeah, and as is the case with most Patreon, accounts, we do give back for your support, and we intend to use that support to up-level this content, to pay for video and audio editing, and just kind of make things more professional so that we can focus on the content and on supporting people individually and through our group coaching, which we love to do. So let's dive into this week's topic, which is a good one. I'm honestly feeling a little bit nervous to share just because it's such a huge topic and I don't know how deep we will go, but we'll do our best given the shorter, limits of this conversation. And the topic is trauma, and specifically being traumatized by trauma and how to heal and move through traumatic events and trauma with grace, with ease, with resilience. And it's such a big, important topic in the context of holistic health. I personally have heard a lot of people talking about the importance of healing trauma when considering any sort of chronic disease, as there's quite a bit of research that correlates traumatic events to increased risk for developing all sorts of chronic disease and even just dying prematurely. So trauma is no joke. This is not like any sort of, nothing to take lightly. That being said, we would like to offer kind of an alternative, different perspective on trauma, on healing emotional trauma, and on supporting the body in healing physically through connecting the mind and the body, the thoughts and the physiology. So, Susanna, do you want to say anything?
Well, I want you to kind of guide the conversation since Ben picked this topic today.
Gosh.
And then I will chime in.
Okay, so it's up to me to guide this conversation.
Well, I know I can tell there's something you want to say in particular, so why don't you say it?
Well, I'll just start by saying that traumatic events happen to every human being. It is pretty impossible to live a life free of trauma, and I don't think that should necessarily be our intention as human beings. I mean, sure, we should work to take care of ourselves and nurture ourselves and surround ourselves with safe and supportive people. But aiming and intending and expecting to live inside a safe, protective bubble is just not realistic or feasible and not necessary. And the reason why it's not necessary is, I like to talk about how just like the body heals itself, we know that when we break a leg or cut your finger, your body is going to heal. You don't have to do anything to make the body heal. And similarly, when psychologically traumatic events happen, we don't have to do anything to heal. In fact, really what we should be, quote unquote, doing is more of not doing. We should be more just being present, because the more we try to do, the more we try to fix in the realm of the mind, in the realm of thoughts, in the realm of trauma, in my experience, the more it seems like we ingrain and engrave and hammer in and, etch into our history all of these things that have happened to us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessary. It's not always constructive.
Mm-hmm.
So I really I'm inspired by, I was just doing a little bit of reading up on the adverse childhood experience study, the ACE study that correlates, traumatic events in childhood with increased risk for chronic disease, like I was talking about. But it is a correlation. We need to remember that it's a correlation, and adverse childhood events or traumatic events in any context do not cause disease. They do not cause chronic disease of any sort. Mm-hmm. And the reason we could say that so confidently is because there are plenty of examples in this world of people who have experienced all sorts of trauma and do not have any sort of post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis and do not have any sort of chronic disease. And some famous examples are like Nelson Mandela and Viktor Frankl, who have just been through quite traumatic lives from the outside looking in. If someone were to just, tell me your story, and they tell their story, and it's like, wow, talk about trauma. But these people are totally mentally well, totally physically well, have no trace of post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's nothing wrong with them. And people who do have a diagnosis of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, there's nothing wrong with them either. There's nothing wrong with you either. It's just those people who relive their traumatic experience and relive those memories simply have a very vivid, creative imagination, and they're able to bring the past into the present moment rather than living fully in the present moment. Because in the present moment, I like to remind myself, and I like to remind other people, that everything is okay. Even if there's bombs dropping outside, even if we're in a war zone, literally, everything is still okay. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you ever. And it doesn't matter what happens in your external environment. That doesn't change your essence of perfectly, divinely whole, complete, nothing broken. You don't need to go in and dig and process and fix and heal and relive things. I think the answer to healing PTSD, the answer to being completely mentally well, mentally fit, totally healthy holistically, is simply being really present in the moment now. And that's not to dismiss traumatic events that have happened in the past. It's not to forget about things. It's not to numb out and just pretend like the past has never happened. It's really looking at the past, looking at our past life events, looking at all of our history just from a neutral place, a neutral, compassionate, inquisitive, loving place where it's like, that happened to me. How am I going to use that experience to mold and form myself into a stronger, more complete, more self-aware, resilient person now? Because I truly believe that all of us, without exception, truly deep down at the root, desire perfect mental well-being. We don't desire to relive traumatic events. It's not in our highest good to go back in history and bring the history to present. I think really we have, human beings have this desire to experience our authentic essence more and more of the time, and that is available. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that diagnostic labels such as PTSD, and this could certainly span into other DSM-5 diagnostic categories, other mental illness categories. These labels are not constructive in general. That's to say that when we place a label, oftentimes all that does is reinforce whatever negative thinking, negative thought patterns, negative beliefs someone has. If someone has traumatic thoughts, traumatic beliefs, and then they get labeled with a PTSD diagnosis, all that really does, not necessarily, but more often than not, what that does is just reinforce to that person who has struggled and experienced lots of traumatic thinking. That just reinforces, oh yeah, there is something wrong with me. Oh yeah, I do need to fix this. I do need to heal this. What do? I must need medication. I must need counseling. I must need to meditate. I must need yoga. I must need to eat this or take that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm trying to say is that no, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to do anything. You need to do more of not doing. You need to be more present. Because as we be more present, as we live more in the now, which is the only place to be, then we experience an authentic connection with our self-healing wisdom, with the self-healing power that runs through the body, it runs through the mind, and we naturally experience peace. We naturally experience mental well-being. We naturally experience our healing potential in the physical body. We can't separate the two. We're always connected, mind and body. And there's nothing you got to do. There's no prescription to heal PTSD. Absolutely not. And the reason why there's not is because PTSD is not a real problem. It's a made up problem. It's a fabricated, creative fabrication, imagined problem that seems and feels really, really real, really, really, really real. Really, 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 really. I think, I don't know if I have ever had, I mean, sure, I've had traumatic events happen to me, but I don't know if I could say that I don't know. It's all relative, I suppose. So, Susanna, chime in here. What's present for you, or what do you have to add or challenge or add, share on this topic?
Well, I love the way that you articulated this perspective and this understanding. I think this can come across as kind of radical for people and controversial for people, because certainly, when you have experienced a trauma and you do relive the trauma on a regular basis, yeah, it feels really real. And that's because when we get caught up in our imaginations and our thinking, that becomes what we perceive as our reality. And you may perceive there's no escape from that. And so, I think hearing you speak about it in this way, Ben, I think some people could argue that, okay, it's not that way of looking at it is not taking the issue, with the amount of seriousness that it needs. But I really, that kind of approach is also just perpetuating this idea that there is something wrong with the mental health of people who relive traumas over and over again. And what Ben was saying, and what I say too, is that imagine if you walked into a counseling center looking for support, and your counselor looked at you in the eye and said, "You are perfectly healthy. You have perfect mental health. There is nothing wrong with you." And to emphasize.
Yeah. Then what do you do? Then okay, see you later.
What do you mean? Then why am I suffering?
Yeah.
And to really examine this idea and this understanding more, underneath all of those imaginatory thoughts that create that traumatic experience is your core. And at your core is innate peace, innate wellness that nothing can shake. Yes, you can lose touch with that peace. You might spend the majority of your life out of touch with that peace, but that peace isn't going anywhere. The only thing that keeps you from being aware of your innate peace is the thought, the personal thought, the imaginatory thought that we take to be the truth. But really, the real truth is what's at your core, what's always there, what no one can take from you. Yeah. So there's this idea that, people who have gone through trauma, they feel broken. They feel like someone has taken something from them. They feel like they're impure, or that there's just, so many different ways to express the feeling that you just feel like something's wrong with you. But no one can ever take away your innate value, peace, purity, and well-being.
Mm. I'd like to back up and just reiterate some things that we've expressed in prior conversations on the topic of mind and thought and holistic health in this regard. And that's the fact that our emotional experience, how we feel emotionally in any moment, is only ever dictated by the quality of our thinking. That is to say that someone with a PTSD diagnosis, and I will put it in quotations because I think it's imagined and is not real. And if you want to challenge me, then we could do that.
And when he says that, we're not devaluing anyone's experience with trauma.
No.
I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is people experience their emotions, or our emotions in any given moment. Even someone with PTSD is the experience of our thought in that moment. So someone with a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, they are just as capable of experiencing peace and happiness in any moment, peace and calmness, perfect peace of mind in any moment. And maybe if we'll use quotes, if you quote unquote distract them, if you take them to a party, if you take them out for a walk in nature, if you take them out to dinner, if you just sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation, if you just do something that will be really enjoyable, chances are that person will not be experiencing their PTSD in that scenario. And then they'll say, oh, well, I just need to go walking in nature more. Oh, I just need to have more quality time with friends and family. I just need to do all these things. And yeah, that might be, supportive to someone's experiencing more peace of mind. But it's important to know, it's critical to know for true health that the emotional feeling, the experience inside, does not come from the walk in nature. It does not come from the dinner with a loved one. It does not come from a meditation practice. It doesn't come from anything. It comes from within, and it's always available. And while it can seem very distant at times, it's important to just conceptually grasp at first that our mental health is always available. And being in a place of trauma or stress or anxiety or depression or grief or whatever other emotional state is not wrong or bad or something that we need to avoid. In fact, it's part of the human experience. It's part of being mentally healthy, is having the freedom and the ability to fully experience the rainbow of human emotions in any given moment. But it's important to know that that rainbow of human emotions, from the joy to the depression and everything in between, doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from the quality of our thinking in a given moment. And there's no exception to that, even in the case of PTSD and trauma. Mm-hmm. And, we can provide plenty of examples to reinforce that. And I'm sure for those listening, you can also think of times where, hey, I've felt really good. And then like a moment later, I felt really awful. And it's easy to attribute that change of feeling to the change of our outer environment. But it's only the quality of our thinking and where our thinking is at in those moments. Because when we're walking in nature or when we're present with a loved one, our mind is quiet. Our mind is quiet. And when the mind is quiet, there's a calm sea. There's no waves in the ocean. We can think clearly. We can experience our essence. We can, if you think about waves waves on a river or on the lake, and if you consider that your essence is at the bottom of the lake, then you can't see your essence when the waves are choppy. It's only when those waves clear down, and those waves being your thoughts, that you can really connect with what's really in that lake, yourself. So I just think it's important to grasp that on a feeling level. And hopefully that gives a little leverage and support for anyone experiencing trauma or any mental illness or dis-ease of mind. I think that the first most important part of healing collectively, kind of this culture of traumatized individuals, is just normalizing trauma and just seeing that trauma is part of the human experience. We had a comment on Instagram, and I completely agree with it, talking about how trauma is, we come into this life, and that this is an interesting belief system that I do share, but as spiritual beings, we come in this life for opportunities to learn. And one of the richest and most direct ways that we as human beings can learn is through traumatic experience, because those impact us. If it's not traumatic, it doesn't really impact us. If you just walk down the street and someone waves to you, it's like you don't remember that. But if you walk down the street and someone pulls out a gun and puts it in your face, that's going to impact you. That's going to be traumatic. That's not to say that you're broken because something like that happens, but that's an impactful experience that provides an opportunity to make peace, to let things go, to be more present in the moment.
Yeah, and what also comes to mind talking about this is the idea of resiliency and how
resilience, or I guess I don't know. Is it resiliency or
both
resilient?
are words.
Okay.
Yes. I looked this up because you kept saying resiliency, and I was like, is that a word? But I looked it up, and it's a real word.
So I started the resiliency
You
thing.
start resiliency. Well, resiliency is like the noun, and resilience is the adjective.
Well, resilience is also a noun. But anyway.
Resilience is also a noun. Yes. Anyway, moving on. Resilience. So part of our human nature, along with this innate well-being, is also the ability to be resilient. After traumatic events happen, we bounce back. And it happens at different paces for different people.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever your pace is fine. It's totally fine. And so I just also want to say, as we're talking about this, we're not trying to hurry anyone through their healing process.
Yeah, that's impossible to do.
No, healing totally takes its own course
in the mind and in the body,
and we have to honor that. Because the more we think about, oh, why is this still affecting me? When is this going to go away? We're just perpetuating more thought and more suffering. So it's really important that we honor our process. And I think it is helpful to just understand that no matter how long you have been down, you still have that resiliency within yourself, and you're still able to bounce back.
Just like in the physical realm, you have a chronic infection, you still have an immune system. It's still at work. All we have to do is, do our best to support it with the physical means that we have available to us. Which also brings us briefly maybe to just touch on why are we talking about trauma? And in this, well, we're always talking about holistic health, but as I mentioned before, trauma sets the body up for physical disease. And that's why, I started this conversation by, sharing how I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, when there's people experiencing chronic disease, it's really important to address the trauma underneath. And it's true. Some people do have a lot of chronic, toxic, stressful thinking associated with their chronic physical symptoms. And the reason why chronic stressful thinking causes chronic physical symptoms, we know that chronic stress raises all of the hormones in the body that promote disease, like cortisol. In the long run, of course, raises our blood sugar, constricts our blood vessels, raises our blood pressure. decreases our immune status, all of these things. And there's plenty of examples of how stress impacts the body physically. And I think it's just important to note that sometimes we might not be feeling, traumatized or stressful, and that's okay. But there is a low grade stressful thought pattern that kind of is the baseline for a lot of people. And then people have a low grade chronic depression, low grade chronic anxiety, and they, wonder where that's from. And it's only from the low grade chronic stressful thinking, which has chronic physiologic effects. So I just like to reinforce that mind-body connection. And, this is not just about people who only feel lousy, mentally, emotionally lousy. This is for everybody. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts or words? I think we did pretty well in terms of timeline, and we didn't go.
We did.
Hopefully we didn't.
I have one thing to share.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't ruffle too many feathers, but if we did, that's all right.
Well, this is a hard topic for many, and so if you stuck through with us, thank you. And if, even if right now this sounds like, no, this approach, no. I mean...
Yeah, I still want to process my trauma. I still want to go in, dive in, fix it, or I just want to ignore it.
That's okay.
Whatever.
Yeah. But we always like to put out this understanding for those who it does resonate with. And one thing I just wanted to close with was a quote I heard for the first time yesterday from George Pransky, and I'm not going to get the quote right, I never do, but it goes something like this, that we're really good at eating the food that is placed in front of us. Like it's lunchtime, we sit down, we're really good at eating that food. We're really bad at eating the food that was served yesterday, and we're also really bad at eating the food that's served tomorrow. And so this metaphor, it's like with thoughts. When we get caught up in thought patterns that are from the past, there's many times
it's stale, it's moldy, it's got fungus on it. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can create some suffering. And then, if we get stuck thinking about thoughts in the future, we get caught up in thoughts of wanting and desiring and wishing things were different. And so focusing on what's in front of us, that's really, I think, the ticket for a lot of things.
Love that. Eat fresh food, think fresh thoughts, and you'll probably be in a pretty healthy place. So let's close on that. And yeah, just a reminder, if you did stick with us this far, subscribe, rate, review this podcast, leave some comments. What do you think? How did this land? We'd love to engage in any sort of conversation. And speaking of conversations, those take place through our weekly group coaching program, where we connect with you, see your face, hear your voice on Zoom, and we're able to engage in topics of mind and body, healing holistically through plant-based nutrition, fresh thinking, fresh eating, and so much more. So go to www.altered.health for more, and for all the show notes and resources as always.
Yeah.
Peace and love.
Until next time.